We are in a period that is somewhere between the run-up to the Civil War, but earlier, like 10 years before, in President Taylor's administration, and the condition in the country after Rutherford Hayes became president and bought his way into the Electoral College by promising to withdraw all the Union forces from the South. So we exposed all these cultural and other differences, and we became fodder for those who could profit immensely by exaggerating our differences and trying to rub salt in the wounds. And that's where we are in a modern sense. If you watched the vice presidential debate the other night between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, I almost had a coronary. You know, we weren't, there are no fact checkers now. God forbid we should have them simultaneously. But Vance actually said there was no big deal when Trump got elected on the Affordable Care Act. I mean, he actually helped to stabilize it. And I said, dear God, this was just a few years ago when they tried to repeal it for the 60-something time with no consequences. You may think that's a great deal, but they did try. And it meant the end of protections for people with pre-existing conditions from excessive rates. And only John McCain stood up. And I think it's one reason his wife and a lot of other people in Arizona are supporting Kamala Harris now. Because President Trump said he was a loser because he got captured. But he stood up, and the people noticed. So that's where we are in history. Now, in this campaign, we have a specific set of challenges. About 44% or so of the people really want Trump to be elected. And they were for him all the time, all three times. And they believe as he does. But there are about 5% of the voters that are genuinely undecided about, the mega issues. And Trump's argument's pretty straightforward and slick. It's basically, I was president for 4 years. We had 2 really good years. I'm not responsible for anything that happened in the pandemic. And we didn't have this inflation. And we had plenty of new jobs. Then Biden gets in, and we have inflation. So you got to vote against them and for me. And it's basically, and if you listen to people, and this especially affects millennials across racial lines, and especially people with families, they have a hard time buying groceries. They have a hard time maintaining their consumption habits, even if they've gotten pay raises. And there have been unusual increases in food, fuel, and housing. So what do we have to do? We have to, my side has to explain that without being defensive. Acknowledge, yes, prices have gone up. And over a year ago, we had 9% inflation, totally unsustainable. And then they had to say why it happened. It happened because we destroyed all the supply chains in the COVID epidemic, and we had inflation in every advanced economy on earth. That's a reason, not an excuse. So, and the third thing is housing. That started with the crash in 2008. I just came from Nevada. They were the third hardest hit state then. People fled the state. And financial institutions came in and bought up all these empty units, and now they own them, and their rates are sky high, and there's a shortage of housing. So what I think we should do is admit the truth and say this happened, and this is what we want to do. What do they want to do? What we want to do is have a federal price gouging law, which we should have and should have had years ago, because we don't want to set prices, but we don't want to be gouged either. And we know how to enforce them because lots of states have them. We should continue our energy policy, and if all possible, accelerate it. We have unlimited potential to support solar and wind. We're trying to improve battery technology. We can do geothermal. We can do all this other stuff. We have now small-scale pellet nuclear technology where you can protect the fuel with ceramic balls, which will give it a much longer half-life before it'll be dangerous. And we can dramatically improve the efficiency of fracking if the standards are high enough and regularly checked. I just want to say one other thing before we leave. If you look at it, what are you uncertain about and what are you certain about in the future? Just forget about your politics. We don't know how long we have before we weep an even bigger whirlwind because of climate change. Therefore, we should be less intolerant of ourselves for delaying what things we know we can do that will also diversify and strengthen the economy. But we do know one thing. There is no country on earth in better shape than we are for the 21st century. That is, we have more people creating more things that are relevant to our future, a lot of it happening up here, right? We have, and contrary to the rhetoric, our diversity is an enormous advantage. And so, but most Americans in both parties are not anti-immigrant, they're anti-chaos. And you can help people understand what happened. We reformed the immigration laws in 1983. We've had more people moving across national borders, not just to America, but all over Europe and the Middle East and Asia and Africa in the last few years than any time since World War II. And that's a lot for people to absorb. So you need to explain that to people. We cannot give up on our diversity. And we cannot forget an even more important thing about diversity. Diverse groups make better decisions than homogenous ones that are lone genius. So I want you to be upbeat and optimistic. But the next few years will be either quite challenging or a runaway success for America, depending on what we do in 2 weeks. Yeah. Bless you.
Thank you.